So good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here in sunny Dublin, actually. I was accused of bringing the rain with me yesterday, but no, it's been great today. And a huge thank you to the CEA, to Ian and to Kathy for inviting us over here. It's been a really great conference. I've made lots of notes, lots of things I should be following up afterwards. Also, it was great to hear the Minister this morning as well call out the work that CEA is doing on the global stage, because I think that's really valuable work. And I think there's a lot we can do working together to share good practice from our different regimes, as well as looking to, get other countries reforming along similar lines to the tools that we have, and, help tackle sort of international economic crime and business misconduct. So I look forward to working more with the CEA in those sort of global fora. So as Kathy said, we're from the Insolvency Service of England and Wales. That last bit of the name is important because there is also an insolvency body in Scotland, the Accountant in Bankruptcy, and we have the Insolvency Service in Belfast as well. So we primarily cover England and Wales, but we do also have responsibility for corporate investigations in Scotland, and we have an office up in Edinburgh to do that work. A lot of our investigation work around companies has historically been around insolvent companies, but that's something that is really changing, actually, and changing at some pace as well. And we're not only now concerned with insolvent companies, but also the activities of live companies and breaches of company law, as well as insolvency law and various other legislation that our parent department, the Department for Business, is responsible. So there's 300 investigators. They're supported by around 60 in-house lawyers and paralegals, and this might sound a little bit scary as well, but our budget for investigation enforcement work is for this year around 67 million. And we also offer a range of sort of personal insolvency solutions. So we deal with bankruptcies, debt relief orders, and breathing space applications. So in terms of purpose of our enforcement regime, well, first and foremost, it's historically been around protection of consumers, protection of businesses from future harm, by tackling misconduct where individuals have been responsible for the failure of a business, haven't run the business well, haven't complied with their director duties. There's been some kind of misconduct or failing in their duties as directors. So the majority of our work has historically been focused on civil enforcement activities. And, but as Dave will be speaking to later, increasingly we're doing more prosecution work within the agency. So bringing offenders to justice, but also seeking redress. And that's an area we're also increasingly looking at, so sort of director liability, both through the civil and the criminal side as well, through things like compensation orders, which I'll mention shortly, but also work to recover proceeds of crime. Just the size of the business population, that's actually grown significantly. It's almost doubled since 2010. Particularly companies registered at Companies House, with just under 5 million of those that are registered. In terms of the insolvency numbers, well, we have around 25,000 company insolvencies every year. That's across the UK and Northern Ireland, but the majority of them are sort of English and Welsh companies. You can see that it's broadly split into sort of civil and criminal work, but actually historically civil has been the much bigger focus for the organisation. I'll just speak very briefly to this. This just gives you an indication of how the agency has changed over the years from its creation in 1883 through to the criminal enforcement teams coming into the agency, the live investigation teams coming into the agency as well, and the prosecuting lawyers joining us as well in 2017. The final point there is around some recent changes following the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act 2023. And actually this is a real game changer for the agency in terms of the work we do, and also for Companies House more generally. But the biggest change to us in close proximity to the Insolvency Service are the changes to Companies House. And that's really changing the company registrar from what it was, which was a passive librarian of information that was submitted, to something which is a much more active gatekeeper of corporate information in the UK. It also introduced over 100 new Companies Act offences around company filings. And Companies House will do some of those itself, but the majority of them, around 80, will be referrals to us. So we're going to be taking on a lot more company prosecution work that's not related to the insolvency of businesses, but is related to company law matters more generally. And I shall hand over to Dave, who will talk you through a bit more about some of the work that we do. Thanks, Dave.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm going to get straight into it. So you've had all the brilliant strategic minds from 9 o'clock this morning until now, and I'm going to take you into some of the tactical weeds. Our investigation enforcement function is really split into 3 disciplines, and we've got about 70% of our effort currently is in our insolvent investigations and our live company investigations. But as we begin to enact some of the changes that are coming in through the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, we'll be balancing that more towards 50-50. But on the right-hand side, that really is where all the change and growth is taking place, and that's creating some really interesting challenges about how we scale our processes, how we change our organisational culture, how we look at cases in a slightly different way. Dedicated response looking at money laundering through corporate entities. We put in a new specialist intelligence team that's beginning to proactively identify cases for us to work up. We've been able to put those cases through the structure I've just showed you and be able to choose which enforcement action would be most appropriate. An example of our criminal work, we've got a gentleman here called Adam Kirkbride, and Mr. Kirkbride was declared bankrupt and therefore prohibited from being a company director. But he was acting in the management of a company in the north of England as a property management company. And this was a case that came across my desk where on this particular day I managed to have the time to read the whole file. So this was a great privilege. The investigation was really comprehensive. And effectively you found a situation where you had somebody that was controlling this company that was able to siphon off around £350,000 from investors. It was able to use the company money as if it was his own to fund quite a lavish lifestyle. What doesn't make it into the press release was the wider harm involved here, where the company was failing to pay for goods and services to the tune of around £2 million, and that ends up creating a situation where 2 other reputable companies have to fold because they're not paid by Mr. Kirkbride.